Tom Brokaw referred to those born in the 1920s as the greatest generation, and for anyone who met my grandfather, you could understand why. With the United States emerging from the Great Depression and World War II looming in the future, Tom Brokaw stated, "The nation turned to its young to carry the heaviest burden, to fight in enemy territory and to keep the home front secure and productive. These young men and women were eager for the assignment. They understood what was required of them, and they willingly volunteered for duty." Today I would like to tell you a little about what made my grandfather, Warren Egler, an embodiment of that generation. From his time as a young man in the Army, to raising his family in Ann Arbor, Michigan, to consolidating his family in Arizona in his retirement years. Born in 1929, my grandfather, for better or worse, was not old enough to fight in World War II, but he could still feel the calling of service to his country. My mother was able to provide some background on his service for me from stories she had been told in her youth. In the late 1940s, he enlisted in the Army and became an airborne ranger. Being a ranger was one of the most demanding units to be in. I remember listening to him tell stories when I was a young child about his many different types of jumps. I was most in awe of the low altitude jumps he performed, jumping from a plane so low there was barely time to open the parachute, the ground coming up so quickly it would jar his knees painfully on landing. During the Korean War, he was deployed in Germany. With the Cold War just beginning to percolate, tensions were high, and Germany was a key strategic point for the U.S. to monitor. As his enlistment continued, through his service and performance, he ascended to the rank of corporal. With this rank, he was often called on to be a leader of his unit. To him, I think, this unit was his family while he was stationed overseas. I believe being responsible for the lives of his unit led to the sense of loyalty he developed for strong teams. And being from Ann Arbor, Michigan, there was no stronger team for him than the Michigan Wolverines, led by Bo Schembechler. I was born in Ann Arbor, and from my time there, I know there is no better example of a college town. A college town has a strong sense of community that is hard to find in larger metropolitan areas. It's almost as if the whole town is one extended family. I believe that this is one of the reasons my grandfather chose to raise his family in Ann Arbor, just a mile or two from the University of Michigan campus. He had a strong connection to the Wolverines, and I believe that had a lot to do with the head football coach, Bo Schembechler. Bo was as close to a military man as you could find in a coach. To him, everything was about discipline. His defensive coordinator, Bill McCartney, said, "Nobody calls to excellence more than he does. He forces every guy to measure up every time. He will never turn his head." I believe the structured life he learned in the Army helped him appreciate this sort of leadership. It also helped that the team was very successful. During Bo's tenure, Michigan won nearly 90% of its games in the Big Ten Conference and finished ranked in the top 10 nationally 11 of his 12 years. But as much as he loved his team and the town he raised his family in, he was struck with rheumatoid arthritis at the early age of 36, and he could no longer handle the cold weather, so he moved out to Tempe, Arizona. Moving to Arizona was not easy on my grandfather. After a couple years, my grandmother and he decided to rent their house and tried moving back to Ann Arbor. But the pain was too much for him, and they moved back to Tempe. He did not order his daughters to move out to Arizona with him like a military man might, but he did encourage them to visit. And after visiting a few times, each of his 3 daughters gradually decided to join him in Arizona. He had developed such a strong family unit that it just felt right for everyone to be together again. His home was the location of any holiday gathering and most weekend dinners. He built, with a little help from the family, a 3-story cabin in Payson for all to vacation in. And yes, every time a Michigan football game was on TV, there was a party at his house. In Arizona, he had found a new life. With the pain of his arthritis relieved a little by the better climate, he spent much of his time volunteering at the Botanical Gardens and the VA. He had both knees surgically replaced after they were destroyed by so many jumps as a ranger. Yet despite the 2 knee replacements, and without telling anyone, he walked a 10K to help raise money for the restoration of the Statue of Liberty. After reviewing a few of the stages of my grandfather's life, I can see why he had such a strong appreciation for family. Today I shared with you a little of the history of my grandfather, Warren Egler. His time in the Army instilled in him the importance of teamwork and unity. In Ann Arbor, Michigan, he found that same sort of unity and teamwork in the University of Michigan Wolverines football team and their coach, Bo Schembechler. And in Arizona, he managed to bring his family back together, and everything was perfect for him once again. When Tom Brokaw referred to his as the greatest generation, I don't believe he was only referring to their military service, but to the way they embraced and supported their families as well.